Well, thank you, Priya, for keeping time. Also, I've agreed to perform a liaison role, which I was unfamiliar with, but I think it will require producing a document at the end that can be archived for this session. So thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to be back in conversation with Lisa Marie Dacanay again, following the CERN-Asia symposium we did, I think, about 6 months ago now, if I'm correct. Where we also had Heri Pronto from Indonesia joining us, and it's arisen really from this book, Social Enterprise in Asia. It's, I mean, I've known Lisa going back to, I think, did we first meet in Korea at the ICSEM workshop? So that's 2014, I think, going back then. And Lisa's PhD thesis was an inspiration for my own thesis in many ways in the literature review. I drew from that. And I continue to engage with some of the concepts of stakeholders as the poor, and what is transformatory in social enterprise, the notion of a distributive versus an accumulative enterprise. So conceptually, Lisa's helped to inform my own critical inquiries into social enterprise quite well, I think, since we met. So yes, it's a great honor to have Lisa in discussion, especially and bringing her into conversation with the Community Economies Institute scholars. I think it's a great move for us to be doing that today. And Lisa, then perhaps just for 5 minutes, you can tell us about your work, for the people joining that are not familiar with your writing and your work in the Philippines. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Isaac, and good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on your time zone, because we are virtual. I'm really happy to be in this dialogue with the scholars of the Community Economy Institute, and it's not all the time that I'm given this chance not to have this global dialogue with scholars who are actually interested in social entrepreneurship and community economy. And I'm hoping that we could really have a conversation, no, that would maybe generate areas of common interest for us to work together in the future. Who knows? But I am the president of the Institute for Social Entrepreneurship in Asia. And what we basically do in the Institute is we do education, research, and the building of platforms for social entrepreneurship towards sustainable development and equitable development. And we actually are focused on promoting social entrepreneurship in a developing country context. So much of our research and education work, as well as our platform building work, is actually focused on that. So later on, we will be discussing the concept of social enterprises with the poor as primary stakeholders, which is actually an area of research that I started way back when I did start doing research on social entrepreneurship early on. And when I say building of platforms, we actually are promoting social entrepreneurship as a major pathway to actually accelerate the Sustainable Development Goals. As we know, the Sustainable Development Goals are failing all over, especially after the pandemic and with the climate crisis, the health crisis that we've just been through, and prior to that, a development crisis where poverty and inequality has been worsening. We have created 5 platforms that are focused on collaboration, advocacy, and working together to change realities as well as the context of this reality, so that we can do poverty reduction and sustainable and equitable development, or to achieve that. Yeah. So the 5 platforms, I'll just mention them now, and if there's interest, maybe we can pursue that during the discussion. But we have a platform on women's empowerment, livelihoods, and food in agricultural value chains. We also have a platform on technological innovations for sustainable development, which is actually focused on, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but community networks, which is trying to set up infrastructure and build capability of the poor and marginalized so that they can have access to the internet. So this is community networks are community connectivity initiatives that try to address the digital divide. No, we also have a decent work for all in sustainable value chains. So promoting sustainable consumption and production, and not just engaging the poor in sustainable livelihoods, no, but also advancing a future where we can change, no, sustainable consumption and production systems. And then we have a fourth platform on health for all. Of course, the pandemic showed, no, the inequities not only in health but in other areas. But the Health for All platform promotes health that is well, community-based health and wellness, basically, and promoting that health should not just be about treating sickness, but it should be about it should be promotive and preventive health. Focus on that. And of course, we also have a platform on rural revitalization, youth, and social entrepreneurship. No? So the rural revitalization movement, I think, is very much needed in a situation where most poverty in developing countries are still in the rural areas. And we're hoping that the rural revitalization, youth, and social entrepreneurship can also engage the youth so that they can be stakeholders in a sustainable future. No? So these are the 5 platforms that we are actually doing very active work with. And we are present in 10 countries in Asia Pacific, in South Asia, Southeast Asia, and East Asia. And maybe it's enough for now in terms of explaining a little bit of what we do. No? So maybe we can pursue specific areas of interest, maybe from based on what the audience and what Isaac and Prior as moderators have in store for us.
Wow. That's yeah, I was familiar with more with the agricultural value chains work in my in the last year or so. I'll just say a bit about myself. At the moment, I'm doing research on digital finance and farming in Southeast Cambodia and Laos, and we're looking at the positive and negative impacts of the digital delivery of financial services, and the work specifically on agricultural value chains has been of interest to me lately. I was not aware of all 5 of the platforms, Lisa, so thank you very much for that. That's a very, very comprehensive range of interventions. My work has always been based in Cambodia, as some Community Economies Institute members will know. So Laos has been something new to me. I've done action research on rural development and social enterprise. That was my PhD research. So my focus has been very much community-based and not so much engaged at the systems level interventions with social enterprise, although USAID have taken up some of my work in their country reports on Cambodia to look at how strength-based approaches rather than top-down approaches can indeed yield more sustainable results for their thinking about how to support social enterprise. So that's one area I'm keen to keep exploring and dialoguing with international development. And I've also done research on social business through water kiosks, and that's something that I'm keen to discuss with Lisa today, is, you know, the differences between social enterprises that do perform well at engaging stakeholders, the poorer stakeholders, and social enterprise models which tend to be a bit more top down, and what is that tension between scale and you know, the breadth of scale and the depth of impact, I guess, is a question that emerges from my own work. So yeah, with digital finance and farming, it's not so much connected with social enterprises directly, but we are looking at how agricultural cooperatives will benefit from digitalized delivery of services. And I'm guessing that the technology for development platform that you're talking about, Lisa, could be of considerable interest to this ACAR project. How to develop connectivity and equity in infrastructures would be something that I'm very interested to discuss with you. Priya, so could we hear from you a bit about your work, and then we can go into some other questions?
Mabuhay. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. I would like first to acknowledge that I am joining this session on the unceded land of the Darug people in Parramatta, Western Sydney in Australia. The Darug people are the traditional owners of this land. I'm very grateful to Lisa for her generosity in participating in the events being sponsored by the Community Economies Research Network Asia node. So as mentioned by Isaac, so earlier this year, we had the privilege of having Lisa alongside him and Harry Pratono, a colleague from Indonesia, to talk about the challenges and opportunities of social enterprises in Asia in an online symposium. So I am delighted that we are gathered here today in this session to extend the conversation of our group previously. And also, I'd like to thank the awesome contribution of my Community Economies Institute colleagues, Isaac, Line, Esbanrado, and Anhil for making this Libiana session possible. So my name is Prior Placino. Not really, have not particularly done projects related to social enterprises, but I have done field-based and ethnographic work with farming, mining, and indigenous communities in the Philippines, and have engaged with organizations that are involved in alternative value chains around building materials and construction, so that and also linked with agricultural products. So that would be kind of an interest that I'd like to really like to pursue in relation to maybe future activities with Lisa's group. So at present, I am the coordinator of the Asian node of the Community Economies Research Network and one of the directors of the Community Economies Institute that has been organizing the #Libiana conference since 2020. So on behalf of the organizing committee, I'd like to thank everyone for attending this session. Yesterday, during the opening of Libiana, we had the privilege of engaging with Dr. Mary Kinyanjui from Kenya, who delivered her keynote on the Africana social economy and solidarity economy around the Utu Ubuntu business model of cooperatives in Kenya. So I'm pretty sure that a lot of connections and convergences can be drawn between this session and that one and this one that we're having today. So next Monday, just kind of a promotion, we'll have Dr. Pieta Sabinotko from Finland, who will deliver her keynote on everyday food production practices and the idea of post-ownership as contribution to economic transition. So I'm pretty sure that there will also be a lot of convergences with that and this one. And please do check out our website and the Economies website and social media for more details. So just another quick background about what I do. So I'm a postdoctoral research fellow at the Institute for Culture and Society at Western Sydney University. So with community economy stalwart, Professor Catherine Gibson, who is in the audience and celebrating her birthday today. Happy birthday, Catherine.
Happy birthday.
Thank you very much.
In a research project being funded by the Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research, or ACIR. And in this project, we mapped the place-based assets and strengths of people and communities in Western Province, Papua New Guinea, and highlight the importance of this methodology for strengthening agricultural resilience in the region. And lastly, was previously a postdoctoral research fellow at the School of Global Studies at Thammasat University in Bangkok, Thailand, where my collaborator and I had looked at issues of environmental and social injustices in concrete urban geographies in the Philippines and Thailand. So I really look forward to learning more about Lisa's work today, and I'm excited to getting additional insights about social enterprises in Asia over the next half an hour or so. Over to you, Isaac.
Thank you, Priya. Yeah. For myself, also as a member of the Community Economies Institute, I've played some roles in looking at how networks develop between different members, and also organizations that the Community Economies Institute may engage with. I did some work for Catherine and Stephen some time ago, quite extensively, looking at other foundations that the Institute may engage with. And just to reiterate what Priya was saying, it would be great to forge an engagement with the Social Entrepreneurship Institute that Lisa has founded and continues to work with. I guess familiarizing ourselves with Lisa's work, then, Lisa, you talk about social enterprises with stakeholders, with the poor as stakeholders. That's a very foundational concept in the work that you do. We'd like to start with asking, what are the commonalities and divergences of social enterprise with the poor as primary stakeholders in Southeast Asia? And I guess primary stakeholders is the operative issue there, isn't it? That they are not externalities, that they are the raison d'etre. And what differences have you noticed between these social enterprises with the poor as primary stakeholders compared to social enterprises in other Western contexts?
Thank you, Isaac, for that question. That was my PhD thesis, actually. I theorized on social enterprises with the poor as primary stakeholders as a major type, a major theoretical construct of social enterprises that address poverty and inequality in developing countries. No? And maybe just to share with the group, I'd like to just do some screen share. No, do you see my screen share?
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. So I'm not sure if it is full. Is it full
Not
share?
Yet.
Okay. Not yet. Oh, it's not sharing. Anyway, can I deal with that? Is it okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So social enterprises with the poor as primary stakeholders, or sometimes I just call it SEPs. No, as I said, is a social enterprise model that we've noted not only in the Philippines, where poverty and inequality are very much the main social problems, but also in other developing countries. No. Because after the research that I did in the Philippines, we were able to validate that social enterprises with the poor as primary stakeholders were also a major type or model of social enterprise in countries like India, Bangladesh, Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, all across Asia. And what social enterprises with the poor as primary stakeholders has three major characteristics. No? First is, like all other social enterprises, they're social mission driven. But because they engage the poor as primary stakeholders, they're explicitly pursuing poverty reduction as a primary objective. And the poor are engaged as workers, suppliers, clients, also as owners of these social enterprises. They are also engaged as partners of social enterprises in their own management and governance, as well as sometimes in value chain governance or management, or in the pursuit of social change as a whole. No? Because many social enterprises are actually pursuing societal goals and not just community development perspectives. But apart from being social mission driven, they are actually wealth creating. No, so like any business, they create wealth. No, but they are engaged in the provision of goods and services. However, they're different in terms of their bottom line. Businesses, of course, will always have as bottom line a profit, but for social enterprises with the poorest primary stakeholders, they have a double or triple bottom line combination of social, environmental, and financial. So the financial bottom line is also important for sustainability of the enterprise, but the financial sustainability bottom line is usually supportive of the social and environmental objectives. No, and I think the other feature of social enterprises with the poor as primary stakeholders, which makes them distinct from other types of social enterprises or models of social enterprises, is their distributive enterprise philosophy. They generate positive economic and social value that they distribute and which is distributed and which benefits the poor as primary stakeholders. No? So their surplus or profits accrue to the poor as dividends. They are used to support activities and services for the poor to overcome poverty. They're invested and reinvested to fulfill their social mission. And sometimes this distributive philosophy is also expressed as foregone profits through living wages, because some social enterprises actually pay living wages rather than just minimum wage. And when they deal with supplier communities, like fair trade organizations would actually provide higher than market prices for buying, no, the raw materials or the supply from social enterprise, community-based social enterprises that they deal with. So these are the three major characteristics that make social enterprises with the poor as primary stakeholders distinct. Yeah. We usually say that social enterprises with the poor as primary stakeholders are usually hybrid organizations. They're hybrid because they're both, they're like NGOs, no, or civil society organizations because they're social mission driven, but they're also like business organizations because they are wealth creating. But unlike ordinary business organizations, they have not an accumulative enterprise philosophy. No? So businesses accumulate wealth for the owners of capital, whereas social enterprises with the poor as primary stakeholders create wealth and distribute that wealth to the poor as primary stakeholders. So I guess about the difference between this model of social enterprise and other social enterprises in the West or in other countries, there are social enterprises that pursue social missions like cultural integrity, like environmental sustainability, no, without necessarily engaging the poor. Of course, they will still be social enterprises, but they will not be social enterprises with the poor as primary stakeholders. Yeah. So
Yeah.
maybe what makes this model distinct is their engagement of the poor and the marginalized. No? So sometimes in discourses that we have done in the Philippines and other countries, like now we are actually promoting a social enterprise bill, a poverty reduction through social entrepreneurship bill to be enacted in our Congress in the Philippines. In the discourse of social enterprises with the poor as primary stakeholders being, with the congressmen and women and stakeholders in government as well as civil society, there was a decision that maybe it's better to call them social enterprises with the marginalized as primary stakeholders, because sometimes the marginalized are not necessarily poor, but they may still be marginalized. No? So like persons with disability, for example, cut across socioeconomic classes, but they would be marginalized as persons with disability. So in that specific context of engaging Congress, you will see that the version of the bill that has been gaining support call the social enterprises with the marginalized as primary stakeholders. No, so in a manner speaking, they're similar, but the poor really addresses poverty elimination, if you may, not just reduction. Yeah. So maybe
Thank you, Lisa,
back.
for
Yeah.
the very elaborate unpacking of social enterprises and the differences between the region and elsewhere. And also thank you for already addressing why you consider these social enterprises with the poor as primary stakeholders as being hybrid. But in relation to that, we're also we're interested on the question of how, because in your book chapter, social enterprises and agricultural value chains, in the Bidet and the Forni book, you've argued for, setting a benchmark for measuring the outcomes of the practices of these organizations being hybrid. So how do these benchmarks, kind of help deal with their hybrid characteristics and prevent them from, their missions being a social driven mission and also economic wealth producing kind of organization?
Yeah, so prior, that's a mouthful in terms of a question because I think the audience might not be familiar with the Bidet and the Forney book, or maybe they haven't read the chapter that I've written there. But let me just start by sharing again a set of slides, the slides that are about, let me share, no? Just a minute. So I'd like to share with you this time. Oops, it's not moving. Prior, could you help me? Because there's a set of slides on the benchmarks for transformational partnerships and women's economic empowerment in agricultural value chains. So I'd like to share that with you before answering your question in terms of how they actually deal with the hybridity, or how hybridity is related to that. Yeah. But the benchmarks for transformational partnerships and women's economic empowerment in agricultural value chains were actually a set of standards, no, if you may, standards that we came up with when we studied. Maybe you can go to the first set of slides. I mean, that one. We actually studied best practices of social enterprises that have impacted on women and men small scale producers, and where women's economic empowerment was achieved. Yeah. We did this study. These case studies were from Vietnam, Indonesia, Philippines, and Thailand. And let me just share with you some of these stories of women's empowerment. No, Imelda Cervantes in the Philippines, for example, used to be a landless agricultural worker, but over a period of 20 years, she was actually empowered to become an entrepreneurial farmer leader of the Negros Organic Fair Trade Association in the Philippines by a social enterprise called Alter Trade Foundation Incorporated. Yeah. So another story that was culled from the best practices was Wasti in Indonesia. She used to be a muscle stripper and really a powerless one without any assets also, but she became the chairperson of a cooperative that is now leading the process of producing muscles, stripping the muscles, as well as selling the muscles to the market. So they now own the means of production, and they also manage the cooperative manages the value chain, yeah, of selling the green mussels. Another example would be Pin of Thailand. She used to be an assetless fish vendor, but now she is the head of a fish processing and slicing group of the Fisherfolk Enterprise, which is actually selling a brand of formalin-free and sustainably fished fish or seafoods. And this is in Thailand, and the Fisherfolk Enterprise creates and processes and sells a blue brand, a set of a brand of seafoods called Blue Brand, no? And they sell it through Lemon Farm, another social enterprise which has a chain of groceries in Bangkok. They also sell online. No? Another example would be Juanita Mamo, again from the Philippines. She used to be a voiceless indigenous woman in a male-dominated tribe, but over time, she became the elected chairperson of the Council of Elders of the Kulaman Manobo Dulangan organization, which actually is an indigenous people's organization that is working towards developing their ancestral land. No, but Juanita Mamo was actually empowered through a process in partnership with a social enterprise called Bote Central that has a Coffee for Life program, helping the indigenous community become not only producers of green coffee beans, but as processors and marketers of their own brand of coffee. Yeah. So, but I just wanted to share these stories of women's empowerment with you, culled from the best practices that we actually studied. But these best practices that we studied in 4 countries, in as I said, in Vietnam, in Thailand, Indonesia, and the Philippines, we analyzed the factors that actually made this agricultural value chain intervention successful. And we came up with a set of benchmarks for transformational partnerships and women's economic empowerment in agricultural value chains. No, we call them benchmarks for transformational partnerships because we actually found in the research, validated in the research, that the male counterparts of the women are also, disempowered in various ways, common to with the women. But in agricultural value chains, women have actually been invisible and continue to be invisible in many agricultural value chains. That's why these best practices were key in providing us insights on the most important factors that could help the transformational process of achieving women's economic empowerment in agricultural value chain interventions. So the first benchmark is about appropriate technology and community-based and oriented innovations, that in order for the transformation to happen, that an agricultural value chain player working with these women and men small-scale producers need to introduce appropriate technology and community-based and oriented innovation so that they can have access to technology, they can have actually access to markets. Like in one of the cases, in Indonesia, no, the social enterprise set up a community-based marketing system right in the community, so that the women will not have to walk 3 kilometers, no, in order for them to sell their products, no. But for example, so the second benchmark is about more substantive share of value created over time, meaning to say that the agricultural value chain intervention does not only assist the supplier communities to be suppliers forever, but they actually are to move up the value chain. Like in the case of coffee that I was sharing with you with the Kulaman Manobo Dulangan organization, the women and men small-scale producers were assisted to produce their own brand of coffee and to sell their own brand of coffee. Yeah? So that they actually, in this context, the whole all of the value created in the value chain goes back to the community, no, in this specific case. So the third benchmark is about food security and resilience. We've found that agricultural value chains often just focus on one specific crop or one specific product, and that affects the food security and resilience of communities. And we've noted that the best practices actually promote diversification of crops and income, in order to also promote resilience, no? So that the community can actually, or the supplier communities of women and men can actually have diversified, the crops that they plant include what they eat for food. No? And it's not just, for example, abaca, or the crop that is being promoted for the value chain itself that they are producing. The fourth benchmark is about empowerment of small-scale producers. We have noted that the most important, one of the most important interventions is really enabling and organizing the small producers to have their own self-governing organizations, so that they can be actually actors in their own development and not just be workers or suppliers in value chains. Yeah. So often, for example, in the case of the sugar workers turned agrarian reform beneficiaries, in this example of Alter Trade Foundation in Negros Occidental, where the assetless workers, agricultural workers, became landowners and were able to assist. They were assisted into becoming, members and leaders of cooperatives that became vehicles for community development. Yeah, so that they actually not only provided sustainable livelihoods in the community, but they really also provided avenues for developing community-based health and wellness programs, even providing electricity and also water in areas where that was not there before. No? So empowerment of small producers as actors in their own development is a very important benchmark. And related to that, I wanted to just jump to transactional and transformational services, because that sixth benchmark is about the importance of two types of services. Now, transactional services are what are provided to the poor and marginalized in order for them to become better workers, better suppliers, and better actors in the value chain. And these are usually, for example, helping them improve their capability to create to produce the volume, the quality, and what needs to be delivered in the market on time. That's a transactional service. But transformational services will be services of organizing and leadership formation. These transformational services are what makes is what makes the difference in terms of the empowerment process of the women and men small scale producers. No? So the combination of transactional and transformational services is very much related to the empowerment of small producers. No? The fifth benchmark, which I skipped, is about stewardship and sustainable consumption and production. We noted that the best practices in agricultural value chains actually engage the farmers, the agricultural producers, not only as economic actors, but to become stewards in the stewards of the natural resource base on which their livelihoods depend. Yeah, and they also promote sustainable consumption and production systems. So sustainable agriculture, sustainable fishery, and the like are promoted by these best practices. And then the seventh, of course, is women's participation and empowerment. And this is actually a cross-cutting element of the benchmarks, no? That women's participation and empowerment needs to be assured with benchmarks 1 to 8, because as I said, because of the invisibility of women in agricultural value chains, they need to be assisted to become stakeholders, to participate, and to be empowered as stakeholders, as equal stakeholders in agricultural value chains. And the eighth benchmark is measurable outcomes of transformation. That the it's important that the impact on women and men small scale producers is actually measured, so that it's really demonstrated that they are changing their lives and they are helping to change their communities and society, or the value chain and the economic subsector that they're operating in. So these are the 8 benchmarks that actually was being shared earlier. It's a mouthful, but the reason why these benchmarks are important when we talk of hybridity is because, you see, managing hybridity is quite difficult in an organization, because of course you need to give attention to financial objectives, but at the same time you also need to give attention to social objectives. And so the benchmarks actually help to focus attention on ensuring that the social objectives are primary in a social enterprise, no? So that because many times mission drift also happens with social enterprises, and the benchmarks therefore assist social enterprises look at and invest in the most important elements to ensure that they're actually empowering women and men small scale producers, no, in the process. So hybridity, we sometimes call social entrepreneurship at the micro level as the art of managing multiple bottom lines. Yeah. And it's difficult to manage multiple bottom lines because sometimes you really, the financial bottom line will be nagging, will be, especially even during the pandemic. No? Many social enterprises were faced with the difficulty of sustaining their enterprise. But it's actually very heartening to note that many social enterprises, despite the difficulties, did not just do what businesses do, no, of saving their enterprise first and letting people go, and just keeping the enterprise smaller so that they can survive. Yeah, there were stories of social enterprises that really worked with their workers and worked with their supplier communities so that they can share in the risks, of managing the pandemic. No? So in one social enterprise, for example, Gandang Kalikasan or Human Nature in the Philippines, they did not let they have more than 500 workers. They did not let a single worker go during the pandemic because they actually talked about the need to, maybe they will just give allowances to workers first. Maybe the management will not get salary for a few months. No, they were making all sorts of adjustments so that no one among their workers would go. Yeah, and they were actually trying to deal with markets so that they would actually not they were trying to buy from their supplier communities, even if the market was not yet open. Yeah, so that they could actually not they would not affect the what's happening at the community level. So these strategies that social enterprises pursue really show that social enterprises with the poorest primary stakeholders are looking at the social objectives, and the benchmarks help in focusing them to actually give investments or provide investments or ensure that they are giving attention to the most important elements, no, of sustainability in the enterprise. Yeah.
Thank you, Lisa. Over to you, Isaac.
Wow, thanks, Lisa. There's um, so much food for thought in there. I mean, one of the things that inspires me there is thinking about having benchmarks and standards as outcomes and informed by narratives of transformation. For example, Watsi, the mussel stripper in Indonesia. It's great to hear that kind of story, and it strikes me as an alternative in some ways to monetized proxies for outcomes that you would get in social return on investment, for example, which tend to be informed by very different priorities, which is, how much are you saving the government? How much are you saving the public budget? And, monetizing things that way. And it seems to me much more generative and productive and appropriate to talk about benchmarks for transformation rather than how much monetized social benefit you get for every dollar invested, which has its place in public procurement, no doubt. But this is wonderful to actually have, that alternative way of thinking about measurement, benchmarking. I was wondering on the transactional and transformation services, if you would like to elaborate a point where the two intersect, in fact, where a transactional service to the quality is transformational at the same time. I've noticed that in some of the Venn diagrams in your work, and I find that interesting.
Yeah.
And after, sorry, yes.
Yeah. So I did not have that Venn diagram shared today, but the transactional and transformational services are distinct. However, we noticed in our studies that there's actually some services that are in the intersection between transactional and transformational services. No, I'll give you a specific example. For example, credit, providing credit. Yeah, that's usually a transactional service because maybe we can turn off the slides first. That's a transactional service. You provide a loan, you get interest from the loan, right? And then the loan is able to help the producer, for example, to plant or to produce what is needed by the social enterprise, yeah, in terms of raw material, right? That's a transactional service, no, credit. But when you link it with a savings program, where the savings program together with the credit helps the small producers community and the women to actually build up their capital, that becomes transformational, because then you are able to assist the process of capital build up uh, in an otherwise in a situation where they would otherwise be they wouldn't own too much assets. Yeah, so a credit and savings program that actually assists the process of capital buildup of women and men, small scale producers, or stakeholders, no, who you are dealing with, would be that savings and credit program that works to improve the asset base of the community or the producers or the poor, and the marginalized, would be both a transactional and a transformational service. Yeah. Another example would be, I made an example about the blue brand of fish. That is the blue brand of fish that is sold by the Fisher Folk Enterprise in Thailand. Um, the the blue brand is actually sold to a market that is looking for, sustainably fished fish that is formalin free, right? So in a sense, it's a transactional service because it's what the market wants. No, but if you look more deeply at what is happening at the community level, you are actually engaging the women and men fishers to sustainably produce fish and to sustainably sell fish, uh, so that they are engaged in sustainable fishery and promoting sustainable consumption and production, which is actually a vision of an alternative society where you have sustainable consumption and production practices as the benchmark, yeah, for production and consumption. So for example, assisting the communities to produce using the blue brand standard, yeah, that is in a sense that is a transactional service because it actually helps develop the community's capacity to supply the market for formalin-free seafood. But at the same time, it's a transformational service because it engages the producers or the fishers in a process of changing consumption and production patterns, right? So those are two examples, I think, that would be great to think about if we want to think of the continuum, no, of transactional and transformational services.
Yep. Thank you, Lisa, for sort of like giving us a preview of the whole actors involved in the agricultural sector, because our next section would be related to how community resilience is built around these. Oh, I'm about to be signed out. What's happening? My computer. No. Sorry. So my question is, in your paper on agricultural value chains, the question that interests us is, what can social enterprises teach agricultural value chain actors? So which seems like a call to configure economic systems differently rather than assigning social enterprise to a specific sector of the
Yeah.
economy per se.
Yeah.
So as you say in that chapter, the research provides an intervention into the discourse of sustainable agriculture.
Yeah.
So broadly speaking, what is the role of social enterprise in creating a more diverse and equitable mainstream economy?
Okay, that's a very good question and a bit complicated too, but I'll try my best. Yeah, but I'll just make it also practical, yeah, so that I think the audience would appreciate it better. You see, the benchmarks are a set of principles. So, in order for it to help agricultural value chain players, we said, I think it's good for us to create scorecards. Yeah. So we created a scorecard for small and medium enterprises, for social enterprises, and for corporate agribusinesses. We also created a scorecard for holders of agricultural value chain programs that are funded by ODA, that are funded by government, that are initiated by non-government organizations. Now, so we created scorecards for all value chain players, for all value chain actors. No? Because what the intention of the benchmarks is really not just to show the way, ensure that social enterprises do not go mission drift, yeah? But the intention of the benchmarks is really to promote, as you said prior, a set of benchmarks that would transform the face of agriculture and agricultural value chains in various countries and regionally and globally. So by creating scorecards that are actually appropriate to the context of small and medium enterprises, to the context of agribusiness corporations, as well as for agricultural value chain program holders that receive ODA funding or that actually are initiated by government, we're able to create a tool that would, in practical terms, assist these various players who are willing to actually promote transformational partnerships and women's economic empowerment in agricultural value chains to become actors themselves, no? And not just supporters, but actors and enablers, no? Of agricultural value chains that are transformative. So I think Bads Patanag is actually our staff. She probably would be able to share with you the links. Bads, can you share that? The links to the scorecards that we created, because we created this different scorecards to assist different value chain players so that everyone in the value chain can actually play a role in empowering women and men small scale producers, no? So we're really hoping that these benchmarks can play a role in showing the way for various agricultural value chain players to transform their practices so that they're able to they become enablers of transformational partnerships and women's economic empowerment. But at the same time, I'd like to share with you again. I'll try to share now, but please help me if I'm not successful. Um, yeah, do you see my slide?
Yep.
Yeah. So my slides are about guidelines for transformational partnerships and women's economic empowerment in agricultural value chains. How is this related to the benchmarks? We did a policy research in ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, about the extent to which policy supports the benchmarks. And we found that there are many gaps. So we developed a set of guidelines, which are in effect a set of policy and program proposals for governments to adopt in order for them to actually incentivize, enable the practice of the benchmarks. No? So if you notice, the first has to do with innovation, innovation towards food security, resilience, and empowerment of small producers. The second guideline is about women's economic empowerment across all functions of the value chain. The third has to do with sustainable consumption and production towards a climate resilient and green economy. The fourth is about recognition and support for social enterprises and inclusive businesses as innovators and partners. And the fifth is about cross-sectoral and multi-stakeholder platforms towards accelerating the sustainable development goals. These five guidelines have sub-guidelines, and they actually together, and we can also share this. I think Bads will also share the link to this in the chat box. But these guidelines are a set of proposals for governments to adopt in order for them to be enablers and incentivizers of the practice of the benchmarks. No? So when we actually embark, these benchmarks and guidelines are actually the focus of advocacy and practice of the women's empowerment, livelihoods, and food in agricultural value chains, the platform that I shared with you earlier. I didn't talk much about the women's empowerment, livelihoods, and food in agricultural value chains then because I knew that you were going to ask me these questions. So this is what it's all about. No? So that platform is focused on promoting these benchmarks and promoting these guidelines so that we can really change the face of agriculture and agricultural value chains. Well, we start with specific countries and then ASEAN maybe, and then maybe in Asia Pacific and the world. Yeah, but we are ambitious because we believe that the time has come for really fundamental change to happen in the way agriculture and agricultural value chains are being pursued, and we hope that the benchmarks and guidelines can contribute to that process.
Isaac?
Okay. Thank you, Lisa. That's yeah. Wow. I'm blown away. I mean, it's obviously the engagement at that level and the impact at multi-systems levels is very inspiring indeed. Along those lines, I have one question before we open it to the floor, which would be just what do you think can come out of the United Nations resolution to recognise and promote the role of social enterprise in sustainable development that was recently adopted?
Yeah, I think the SSE, this is the SSE resolution, no, of the United Nations system, which actually was a, a a resolution that has been lobbied by Catalyst 2030, which is actually where we're part of. It's a movement of social entrepreneurs and social innovators globally. And we're happy that it is now a resolution of the General Assembly. But the social solidarity economy resolution promotes the social and solidarity economy, of course, right? And the social and solidarity economy um, promotes a set of principles that are unlike the market economy, right? The market economy promotes price setting through, distribution of goods and services through price setting, right? But the social and solidarity economy and the social and solidarity economy organizations, including social enterprises, promote principles of reciprocity and redistribution. Yeah, and to that extent, I think social enterprises with the poor as primary stakeholders, they actually will benefit a lot from support coming from the state, from governments, and other multilateral agencies and the like, in order to grow and develop. In our study of social enterprises in the Philippines, despite the fact that government has not systematically assisted social enterprises, and especially social enterprise with the poor as primary stakeholders, which are the social solidarity economy organizations we're talking about here. Um, Social enterprises with the poor as primary stakeholders grew from 30,000 in 2007 to 264,000 plus by 2017, before the pandemic. No? So despite no government support, it's growing. No? The sector is growing. That's because I think it's being fueled by actors, non-government actors. Some government actors, yes, but mainly non-government actors that are seeing the need to develop these alternative economic enterprises in order to address poverty and inequality, as it is worsening. So the social solidarity economy resolution of the UN, I think, will encourage governments, more governments, to consider enacting policies and programs to promote the social and solidarity economy, including social enterprises. There's some confusion sometimes about social enterprises that are in the market economy, because for us, social enterprises with the poor as primary stakeholders are sometimes in the social solidarity economy, which promote redistribution and reciprocity, but also some social enterprises locate themselves in the market economy. But I'd like to make the clarification that as they locate themselves in the market economy, they they actually advocate the need for ethical and fair markets. Yeah. So, in a manner of speaking, while not all social enterprises are part of the social and solidarity economy, especially intermediary social enterprises that assist community-based enterprises, no, when they reach the market, they actually are more part of the market economy, but they are promoting ethical as well as fair markets. So in the bill that we are promoting in the Philippines, the poverty reduction through social entrepreneurship, we actually promote this dual role of social enterprises, no, that they are we need social enterprises that are successful in operating in the social and solidarity economy, because reciprocity and redistribution is very much needed to solve poverty, no. However, we also need to assist social enterprises that are trying to promote ethical markets and are also trying to promote fair markets, no, which together, no, together social enterprises that are promoting the social solidarity economy and social enterprises promoting the ethical and fair markets together actually will change the way the market operates. Yeah. So in that sense, we are happy that the UN, the United Nations, has already recognized the importance of social solidarity economy organizations, including social enterprises. And we hope that that will encourage more government actors to actually provide enabling policy and enabling programs for social enterprises, especially social enterprises with the poor as primary stakeholders in developing countries. Yeah.
These are really very good developments, and we're really looking forward to how various governments would pick up on this resolution. Thank you, Lisa, for sharing that. In the interest of time, I mean, we have prepared different points for conversation, but we'd like to maybe now open the floor to open questions from our participants, so that we can also, hear their own engagement with your work, Lisa, and the work that other participants are doing around similar topics. So we're now opening the floor for Q&A. You can raise your hand, Catherine.
Yep, thanks very much. Yeah, thanks so much, Lisa, for that fantastic overview of what you're doing. And it's incredible to see how much this whole field has developed so much. When I started working in the Philippines in the 2000, it was no one even knew what a social enterprise was. So a community enterprise was so it's wonderful just to see how much traction this whole intervention, I think, has had. And I'm kind of interested in, that you made the comment early on that the SDGs are failing. And I'm wondering, in a bigger picture kind of view, what role the social and solidarity economy and social enterprise can play in, in meeting the SDGs. It's as though, the UN has now given up on business as usual and is now saying, oh, well, now the social economy has to do it, and this is what I went to the Syriac meeting in Korea just in July or whatever, and I was kind of thinking about, well, what is the bigger, I mean, you talked about transformation in so many interesting, very specific ways, but if we're thinking about transformation at the sort of global planetary scale in terms of dealing with climate change and massive inequality and so on, what role can this, whether we call it a sector or whether we call it an amalgamation of activities, play in actually moving the world in a different direction? And I guess interested in, like, some of the things that you brought up was, for instance, for women, it seems like you were talking about ways that they were actually gaining ownership or collective ownership of means of production. So there was a form of commoning going on there for the poor. And I'm interested in how that goes with the benchmarking for the agribusiness sector. Like, how do they deal with the idea of benchmarking, increasing empowerment for women or for poor people in terms of actually access to land and access to resources? Because it seems to me that is one of the big transformations that's going to be needed in a way, is kind of that transformation of ownership of resources to a different segment. And the other thing that I was thinking about in the Philippines is, there's still very much the growth trajectory, the growth orientation, the consumption vision of development that most young people, even rural people, still subscribe to. And to what extent can this sector, the social enterprise sector, promote a different way of living that is more sustainable, that is less focused on consumption? And I wondered to what extent there is a role in the agricultural production sector for just direct food provision rather than via the market. In other words, buying out of value chains and just going straight to direct production. And I noticed you mentioned that in many cases for poor people, you're advocating diversification of crops and so on. Presumably, some of those crops would be just produced for use, not necessarily for sale. But how does that figure within rural communities? That idea that you might actually have some part of the economy that's actually just producing direct for use rather than for exchange value. Because it seems to me, again, that's one of the arguments that people say the foundational economy people are arguing for at a more sort of planetary scale, that we need to take parts of the economy out of market provision and move it toward direct provision, like the state used to do, but doesn't do that much anymore. Although what you were talking about was local producers actually starting to produce their own food, their own electricity and water, taking off where the state should be doing. But I'm just wondering how you think about those kind of bigger questions of transformation, and whether there's a way that this, in the Philippines anyway, there can be any nudges towards a real shift in where, how economies operate, really, given we've still got a very, avaricious, agribusiness oriented, mining oriented, growth oriented, etc. economy there.
Actually, let me start by just focusing on the Philippines first, so that it would be more concrete in a sense, because of course we're talking about global inequality here, but I think we will need to really do interventions where it matters, right? And it's really in the grassroots where it matters. So it's really mainstreaming what social enterprises are doing now on their own, so that they become government programs or government supported programs. Now, that's the way to go, to mainstream what we are doing now. We can at best do modeling and replication, but with government resources and ODA resources, I think we can really change the system. And of course, that will entail policy. And that's the reason why in the Philippines, we have really focused on enacting a poverty reduction through social entrepreneurship law. And that is actually a set of policies and programs that would create an enabling environment for social enterprises with the poor as primary stakeholders to grow and develop. No? So we have been doing this since 2012. And right now, we are at a stage where we have gone the farthest in our advocacy efforts, because now, at least the upper house, which is the Senate, and the lower house, the House of Representatives, they have created technical working groups that have finished the process of creating substitute bills. And we're about to have a process, hopefully, a bicameral process, where before the bill is passed, into law. I mean, what I'm just trying to share is that we have gone. This is the most advanced we've gotten since 2012, when we started the advocacy process. No, and in the process of doing this, we have done some compromises. For example, now we used to push for tax credit, tax incentives. No, that social enterprises, because they're creating value for the poor and marginalized, they should be given tax incentives. But government agencies will just not hear about it. So in the substitute bill that we have agreed to in Congress, at the moment, we have agreed to shift from tax incentives to tax credits, meaning to say that social enterprises, because they create value, we can monetize this value. Isaac was talking about social return on investment as a possible way of doing that. We can monetize this value and then give it as tax credits to social enterprises. No? So we have let go of tax incentives as a policy advocacy point, and embraced what is acceptable to government, but at least for tax credits. No? So we're going through this process of creating that enabling policy, as well as an enabling environment for social enterprises to grow and develop. And I think there's no substitute to that, because we cannot just do social enterprise development by ourselves, no, without engaging government. We need government to mainstream social entrepreneurship as a pathway towards sustainable development. And that's the only way, I think, globally, that we can do so. And that's why we're happy that the United Nations has endorsed or has passed the resolution supporting the social solidarity economy. And if you notice, let me just point out also that in the guidelines for transformational partnerships and women's economic empowerment and agricultural value chains that we are promoting with ASEAN and ASEAN member states, notice that the guideline number 4 is really recognizing social enterprises and inclusive businesses as transformational partners of the poor. Yeah. But in the sub-guideline, I just wanted to point out that inclusive businesses are businesses that are still mainly engaging the poor for their benefit, for their needs in the value chain. So the way we have framed the policy to work with inclusive businesses is actually to enable partnerships with social enterprises and non-government organizations to provide the transformational services needed by the poor so that they can be engaged transactionally by inclusive businesses. No? So
Mm.
going back to your original question of the role of social enterprises, I think it would be social enterprises that would also work with corporates, that would work with other actors in value chains, various value chains, not only in agriculture, but in also non-agricultural value chains, in order to change the way that things operate in the economy. No? So I think the critical role that social enterprises will play is in the redistribution, is in the practice of a distribution,
Mm.
is what will make sure that inequality is addressed. When social enterprises work with the poor and marginalized as primary stakeholders, then distribution of wealth and distribution of benefits is possible. So even in relation to working with corporates and working with inclusive businesses, we advocate their partnership with social enterprises rather than working with communities directly. So I think that's the critical role that social enterprises could offer, because I think that's also the strength of community-based social enterprises. Now, they're the ones who know how to work with the communities. So it is they who are able to bridge, I think, the transformational partnerships needed for purely business-minded, corporates to engage the poor. So it's
Yeah.
okay that they remain transactional, but government needs to play a role in promoting the transformational partnerships with NGOs as well as social enterprises so that poverty reduction, redistribution is possible, and it's not just business as usual.
Thank you.
We'll cut it there.
Sorry.
Lisa, we have another hand from Jeffrey. Jeffrey, can you identify yourself
Hi,
for the question?
good afternoon. This is Jeffrey from Malaysia. I'm a senior lecturer at University of Science Malaysia in Penang. I would like to express my appreciation for the insights contributions, and I hold great admiration for the work that Lisa have done and ISEA has accomplished. Before I joined University of Science Malaysia as an academic, actually I used to work in social enterprise for over 10 years, and I established my PhD study in how can we improve the social enterprise performance in Malaysia and Singapore context. And then now I'm supervising a few of my PhD students from Vietnam, Bangladesh, and China in this area. So I'm really passionate about how can we promote this sector. I have a few questions that I would like to get some insights from Lisa. Okay, so first of all, my current research focusing on social entrepreneurship performance. We know that it's really hard for this hybrid entity to perform or even to survive. Okay, so do you have any advice? How can social entrepreneurship can excel and during this context? That was my first question. Okay, the second one is considering the relatively small size of social enterprise and community. In Malaysia, we only have about 400 social enterprise, and only about 40 that have gone through the accreditation process in Malaysia. So it's really small. Even in Singapore, there are only about 300 that have registered with their government. So we can see that the impact of this sector is really limited. Do you have any recommendation or strategy that can be employed to nurture or to expand this sector? Of course, government is part of it. Okay, maybe you can share some of your practical recommendations. And the last one is from my side. Okay, I'm keen to explore opportunity for collaboration with both you and your institution. So how could you recommend to initiate this kind of collaboration, or maybe we can talk after these sessions?
Yes.
Yeah,
So
that's all.
You can answer one and then
Yes.
and then we can collect other questions and we
Yeah,
can put
that's a
together.
good
Yeah.
way.
Sorry, Jeffrey. Just so that we can accommodate two
okay,
more.
so I will
for the
choose answering one. Jeffrey,
Yeah.
I will just provide you our contact details and maybe we can
Sure,
work
sure.
together outside of this forum. But I wanted to talk about social enterprise performance. I think social enterprise performance is something that social enterprises need to be assisted to do, because a lot of social enterprises are doing a lot of good work, but they do not have the capacity nor the resources to measure
Yes.
their social impact. You see, so we believe that social enterprise resource institutions, academic institutions, governments have a role to play in terms of enabling social enterprises to have a culture of social impact measurement. And maybe that's I mean, there are social enterprises that do measure their social impact, but most social enterprises still don't have the capacity to do that. Yeah. And enabling institutions need to step in order for that to really happen. Even in the social enterprise law that we're proposing that government provides resources for such impact measurement to happen. Yeah. So uh, prior, you wanted to manage this in such a way that
Thank
another
you.
question is
Lisa.
addressed.
Yep. We'll invite another one. Jenny. And then I'll echo Michelle Carnegie's point, or just comment, and then I'll throw the mic to Isaac. Give the mic to Isaac. Jenny? We can't hear you, Jenny.
Prior, just before Jenny answers, I would just like to say before the end of the session,
back on.
if people could write down one word on a sheet of paper to show it on their screen at the end, that would be great.
Okay, am I good to go? Can you hear me?
Yep. Go ahead, Jenny.
Yeah. Lisa, just incredibly impressive, the work that you are doing, and you so articulately presented that work. So it was just wonderful to hear your presentation and your response to the questions. I wanted to ask about the you gave the figure that, and I sort of missed it. Was it that social enterprises, they'd grown in number from 70,000 to over 260,000, and I
No.
sort of missed whether that was globally.
No.
And over what period of time? But the thing I mean, what I really wanted to ask about it is, where's the impetus for that growth coming from? Like, what, how is that happening?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Jenny, just to clarify the figure I shared a figure from the Philippines, because
Okay.
because
Wow.
of my thesis, my PhD dissertation, and the research that has happened supported by the British Council and UNSCAP. We were able to get the figure of 30. I was able to generate the figure of 30,000 social enterprises in 2007 when I started my PhD thesis, and then the figure that was generated in 2017 by a study done by British Council supported by SCAP, UNSCAP, is 164,000. Um, so so this was over a period of 10 years, right? 2007 to 2017. And I did mention that this happened despite no systematic government support, right? And what is fueling, I think, the growth and development of social enterprises despite no systematic government support is the presence of actors that are actually committed to helping the sector grow and develop. And I'm talking here about both local and um, regional and global actors, including, I think, the Poverty Reduction Through Social Entrepreneurship Coalition, which is a coalition of practitioners, resource institutions, academic institutions, and the like that have banded together to promote poverty reduction through social entrepreneurship. Yeah. So I think the non-government players have played a bigger role in the development and growth from 2007 up to 2017 in the Philippines. And the argument we're trying to make is that if government supports social enterprises systematically, then we can really, grow the sector by leaps and bounds. Yeah. So I don't have the figure for the growth of social enterprises in all countries, but in countries such as Indonesia and in countries like I think Thailand, the figure is also significant. Yeah. There have been studies done by the British Council estimating the growth of social enterprises here. But yes, you're right. In Malaysia, I think, and Singapore, the growth has not been as much. And maybe the reason for that is because in terms of the population that needs the support in terms of livelihood services, maybe the gravity of the problem is relatively, I'm not saying it's not there, no, but it's relatively less in Singapore and Malaysia compared to the other developing countries where poverty and inequality are really stark and are really, uh, it afflicts hundreds and thousands, no, millions of people. In fact, in the Philippines now, it's 25%, right? So, and because it's 25%, then really there are many more actors that are wanting to do something about that. And the phenomenon of social businesses initiated by well-meaning new generation social entrepreneurs, young people who just want to help resolve poverty, they're growing. They're the fastest growing social enterprise segment in the Philippines. Although the biggest segment are still cooperatives. Yeah.
Thank you for that information, Lisa. I just would like to echo Michelle Carnegie's comment on the chat box. So Lisa, the benchmarks and the transactional and transformational services concepts are very inspiring. So she has her colleague from CARE, Savong, on the call and may be able to share about partnerships CARE is seeking under our new project Land Care. So Savong, would you like to kind of share a bit? So I'll give it 2 minutes and then I'll give the mic again to Isaac for a closing question or engagement. Savong? Okay, or you can just read the additional comments from Michelle. Isaac, over to you.
Okay, that's been very interesting to hear that discussion as it progressed. Lisa, your response to Catherine, especially around intervening where it matters and lobbying government. I mean, sometimes I guess I'm very skeptical of lobbying government, but what you're doing in the Philippines seems to be, it is having an impact, and that's really encouraging, because when I'm thinking that as an avenue for change, it does indeed make sense. So I would say, for example, with sugar producers, corporate social responsibility to me does not make sense as an avenue for always for engaging corporate agribusiness with the principles of empowering the poor as stakeholders. If we were to look at Bonsucro, for example, and the track record of Bonsucro, well, Tate and Lyle pulled out of Sucro.
Isaac, you're breaking. Connection.
In Cambodia, whose businesses are associated with dispossession on an almost unimaginable scale, with people having their streams filled in, their livestock shot, and Coca-Cola were doing business with him, and they eventually stopped because of a court case in the European Court of Human Rights. But Tate and Lyle did not. And they just said, oh, well, we'll withdraw from Bonsucro then. So I feel that avenue of making things law is probably more productive sometimes than trying to go through the corporate social responsibility avenue and the Global Compact and so on. So do you have any comment on that?
Yeah. Am I answering that again prior? Or?
We have 2 minutes, Lisa. If you could just give us a quick,
but I think government needs to, government needs to play a role in enabling transformational partnerships with social enterprises and businesses. Because I think, as you said, businesses are not compelled, right? So it is actually the leaders of businesses that would make their businesses become more socially responsible, right? And if they're not socially responsible, it will be enabling policy that would create that context for them to become enabling partners of the poor. And social enterprises need to play a role in that partnership. Otherwise, the transactional relationship will remain.
Kat Gibson, would you like to share what you posted on the chat?
Just going to say that Jean-Louis Leville's book, The Solidarity Economy, which was published in French quite a long time ago, is just coming out in the English translation in our Diverse Economies and Livable Worlds book series. So it's available now. But just one of the things that he really advocates is the need for institutional support for social and solidarity economies, and that's going to be very important, including all sorts of ways of the state at various levels being able to be involved in providing those kind of institutional, regulations and other things that will enable, as you just said, enable this to flourish. So I think, he's really backing the argument up that you're making, Lisa. Yeah. So, but anyway, just thinking some of your groups in the Philippines might be more able to read that book than the French translation now, so it'll be available. Yeah, great.
Thanks, Kat. Isaac, because we're tasked to kind of have to write a word that we have to kind of project, and then we'll screenshot, but I'm not really sure if it's how clear would that happen. I don't know how I could screenshot without wait.
Because you have to write. Do I have to write back to front?
I don't know how to wait. Okay, I'll screenshot. Capture. I can't see. All right. So it's really a great pleasure having you, Lisa, and everyone who's participated in our today's talk. And thank you for always supporting the events of the Community Economies Institute and the Community Economies Research Network Asia. So we'll see you again in our future events. Thank you very much, Lisa. Thank you, everyone. Happy birthday, Kat.
Thank you so much. That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, welcome. So see you again another time. Bye.
Yeah. Hopefully, if I go back to Ateneo, I'll see you.
Can you provide me what was in the chat, because I wasn't able to put down? Yeah. Can you just share with me?
Yeah, I'll share you the chat, all the chat.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very
Lisa.
much. Bye.
Have a good day. Bye.
Whoops. Hala.